order. Can I also welcome Councillor Cardwell as first meeting of the Planning Committee. Welcome. I hope that you enjoy your time on the Planning Committee. We do have many interesting discussions and debates. And I'd also like to welcome members of the public, officers and applicants and objectors as well to today's meeting. So without any further ado, can we ask, is there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from a number of members today, from Councillor Sue Walker, Councillor Anarchy, and from Councillor Billy Lake, for which we welcome Councillor Radford as his alternate.
Now, declarations of interest. Before I invite members to declare any interest, I would like to declare an interest on item 4, a non-pecuniary interest as a former chair of the Friends of Springfield Park and currently chair of the community of Springfield Park. So I will not be taking part in any debate or discussion or vote on that particular item. Also on item 5, because it's related to Alder, for the purpose of clarity, I'm going to declare an interest on that as well and not take part in any discussion or debate on that particular item. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Prince.
Similarly, I'm declaring interest in item number 4, and I also will be leaving the room for that discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Can I declare an interest in item number 4, please? And I'll be leaving the room too.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting, pages 4 to 8. Can I refer members to pages 4 to 8 of the agenda, which comprise the minutes of our last meeting as held on the 31st of August 2021. Are the minutes agreed? Thank you. Item 3, urgent business. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. We have no urgent items of business to consider today, nor are there any proposals to vary the order of business for today's proceedings. So if I can revert to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. I'm now going to vacate the chair and ask the Deputy to preside over the next 2 items. Thank you.
For the benefit of those members of the public watching today's live stream of proceedings, the Chair, having declared an interest, has vacated the chair for the duration of the next 2 items of business, and in addition, 2 further members of the committee have also left the chamber, having declared similar interests. So we therefore welcome Councillor Helen Thompson as Deputy Chair, who will be presiding over agenda items 4 and 5. Deputy Chair, welcome.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, which is planning application 20F3280, Springfield Gardens on Eaton Road in Knotty Ash Ward. And I would like to invite the agents and representatives of the applicant to address the committee. So first of all, can I invite, you may wish to speak in whatever order you've decided yourselves. So we have Harry Sporton, Mike, who is the planning consultant, Mike Braun, who is the architect, and Harinder Daliwal, who is the applicant. I address the committee, please.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address Planning Committee. My name is Harry Sporton. I'm a planning partner at Gerald Eve, and we are Step Places planning advisors. Before our architect presents the scheme to you, and you hear briefly from our client, I want to make 3 specific points that are material to the determination of this planning application. They're also set out in the officer's report before you. Firstly, the site is brownfield in nature and located in a highly sustainable location. The principle of this proposal, a residential-led mixed-use scheme, in this location is in accordance with the adopted and evolving planning policy. This is confirmed by the Planning Committee report. Secondly, and perhaps the most important point I would like to make, is that Step Places has acquired the site from the NHS Trust. The replacement park is an issue between the City Council and the NHS Trust. It is not material to this planning application. Nevertheless, our proposal is considered to benefit the park with not only a carefully designed relationship to it and clearly adding passive surveillance, but also a financial contribution of over £180,000 to improving the park for the benefit of not only the new residents, but the existing residents that will use the park. Car parking and traffic. The planning application was subject to significant pre-application discussions with your officers. A full transport assessment and draft travel plan has been submitted with the application. Your Highways Department supports this proposal, and the report before you states the development is acceptable in highway and parking terms in accordance with UDP policies and national policy. I will now pass. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Braund, Architect Director at BDP. I'm leading the regeneration of this project for Step Places and the creation of Springfield Gardens in Knotty Ash. And this is a part redevelopment of the former Alder Hospital site, as you can see on this slide here. So our site is just about hopefully legible in orange or brown, depending on what your eyes see, with Eaton Road to the bottom of the slide, Alder Road to the right-hand side of the slide, the new hospital and their expansion land to the left-hand side of the image, and the new park and loop line to the south of the image. BDP have been involved with Alder Hey since the hospital. In 2010, we designed the new children's hospital, and we were responsible for the vision to create this world-class health campus that was awarded in 2018 the building of the decade by the BBC. And we've also had a long history with Liverpool delivering projects such as Liverpool One and the sort of transformational world-class placemaking that's realised. And we feel that Springfield Gardens is a key project both for us as architects, but also for our clients, Step Places, in delivering the completion of the Alder Hey vision for this site and creating a master plan that knits both healthcare and community together in a unique healthcare campus. Our design approach has been founded on a deep and detailed understanding of the existing site. We understand that the former Alder Hey Hospital played a key role in the foundation of the area surrounding it. And with the relocation of the hospital to its new home, it's created a gap between a lot of the uses that were formerly surrounding the area on Eaton Road and Alder Road with Ronald McDonald House back towards the new hospital. And a key part of our master plan approach was about re-knitting those two things back together and creating a comprehensive integrated master plan and connecting with the new Springfield Park. And these are some images just to kind of give you an idea of what the site is like today, a sort of an open brownfield piece of land ready for the redevelopment. And this slide captures our vision for Springfield Gardens, and it's about, as I said, it's about creating a bespoke context to Alder Hey Hospital, responding to the needs of the NHS and the wider community, and creating a place that's a key piece of this world-class health campus developing on the adjacent site next to the new Springfield Park. Our plans for Springfield Gardens are not just about delivering houses on brownfield land. They're about delivering a new health-led mixed-use community. And the uses within the master plan are mixed and respond directly to that use of, people can see my mouse. So to the front of the site, we've got a new service department building solely for the use of the NHS to allow step-down care. And to the side, running up our new Park Boulevard, is a new science research building for the trust. To the base of these buildings here, we've got some new local retail, complementary to the retail that's on the opposite side of Eaton Road, and hopefully drawing people back to that high street that used to serve the hospital. To the base of this location here, there is a new gym facility responding to the needs of the NHS and also the local residents. There's a new replacement creche proposed on the site, which is replacing a former creche that sat next to Ronald McDonald House and gives it dedicated drop-off and parking facilities. To the opposite end of the site, there's a new retirement building that identifies, the need to create high-quality retirement homes in the city. We're also delivering next to Ronald McDonald House a specialist housing for young adults with autism, responding to the needs in Liverpool. And responding to the department within the hospital. And then we're also delivering a mix of family housing and apartments that deliver the vision that was set out to us at the start of the project to attract and improve the retention of the very best people working for the hospital. Our master plan approach is about creating strong permeability through the site, creating an extension of the parkland landscape from Springfield Park through to Eaton Road, and by doing so, breaking down those traditional barriers that the hospital previously set. And our design creates a series of distinct character areas with scale and massing to suit, embedding that within the existing context that's there today. We start with a new public piazza created to Eaton Road, delivering a new parkland boulevard, drawing people up through the site and connecting to this amazing new arrival space, we think, that links hospital, park and community together in one place. Alder Road provides a key arrival space for us as well, and an opportunity to break down that former defensive nature of the site with wall and heavily kind of planted edge, and draw connections through to the hospital and the park as a result. Whilst to the park edge and Ronald McDonald House, we want to create a quieter residential feel for those family homes, the autism retirement homes. And connecting Ronald McDonald House to the hospital has been a key master plan consideration, with both a direct sight line to the hospital, as you can see on that previous image, and also pedestrian-friendly routes either through the park or through our development are proposed. The park edge is proposed to be permeable and democratic in its design approach, where everyone gets a view, and all the buildings take a well-known urban design principle of providing passive surveillance over the park and enhancing the feeling of safety and long-term usability of that space outside. After winning the competition in 2017, run by the NHS and the council, we really have taken our time developing this scheme. It hasn't been rushed into planning. And we've developed a scheme through extensive consultation with both ward councillors, local community, MP, the planning, highways, tree officer, access officer and urban design officer. And our scheme has evolved significantly over that period of time to respond to that commentary that we've received. And the scheme being presented today is a culmination of that process to create this really unique and high quality development that you see before you. Our approach is to create this integrated scheme as illustrated by this image from Eaton Road, where the Park Boulevard, as described, can be seen running up through the centre of the slide. And to the right hand side, you can see this serviced apartment building. It has a relationship back to the former hospital building that sat on the site with its Victorian strong stature. And to the left hand side is a brand new science research building for Alder Hospital itself, and that is purposefully contemporary and dynamic and has an exoskeleton to kind of present a biophilic design approach. But the architecture of the surrounding scheme is intended to be a family of buildings, predominantly in buff brickwork with a few other materials introduced for variety. But that's intended to give long-term civic kind of presence to this scheme that is soft and sensitive to the creation of this parkland environment that we want to create. All of the homes are designed to the absolute best standards. They're all designed to achieve nationally prescribed space standards and absolute minimum. We're exceeding the local emerging design policy in terms of accessible homes. And all of the homes that you see before you are bespoke house types. None of these are houses that have been used or apartments that have been used on previous schemes. They've all been designed bespoke for this site and this context. One of the kind of key points obviously is we are providing 2 movement access points, and both of those access points are making use of existing locations of access onto the site. They're not new locations. And as Harry, my colleague, mentioned, our design approach is absolutely in line with Liverpool's policies, but it's been an approach that's been about creating and promoting a low car use scheme through access to public transport, obviously employment through the NHS, but also creating all of the amenities that are necessary for people to live sustainably on this site, and obviously have amazing access to the park and the loop line surrounding. Trees have obviously been a key consideration for us. Alder Road does have a strong green feel, and we are proposing some tree removal to that location in particular. And that's about delivering our vision in order to open that aspect and deliver our development. But we are providing a significant enhancement to the number of trees that are being provided, with over 140 new trees being planted within the scheme. And a significant amount of net biodiversity gain. And again, this sort of just shows you some of that context with Windmore Road there, and some of those trees running down that side. And the vast majority of those trees are being retained. That aspect should be noted as well. Inclusive access, as I've mentioned at the outset of this scheme, is all about inclusive access. You know, the context of where it sits is massively important. We are looking to over-provide M43 homes within the scheme, and health and wellbeing has been the foundation block of working in this health campus environment that we see ourselves. So that's about creating new public spaces, extensive greening on the site, minimising the need for car usage, and creating buildings that are inherently sustainable and ecologically friendly. In summary, we're massively excited by this scheme before you today, and this has taken a long time to bring forward, and we're very pleased to have the support of your officers. We believe this is a really unique opportunity to not only create a high quality mixed use residential development, but also one that promotes and supports Alder Hey Hospital, and we think this is going to create another piece of that world-class health campus that will keep people coming back to this site and want to be employed on this site long into the future. I'll now hand over to my developer, Harry Dallywell, to talk you through his approach to the scheme. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Harinder Dallywell. I'm the Managing Director of Step Places. We're an award-winning placemaker and developer. We work across the northwest of England with public sector partners, bringing forward and delivering sustainable design-led schemes. The brief was to produce a mixed-use health and wellbeing campus with the same quality as the award-winning hospital buildings, promoting the benefits of healthy lifestyles through placemaking and sustainable development. Subsequently, we pulled a strong professional team together, working with Step Places to deliver the vision. The scheme brings together all of the above and helps to meet the needs of the NHS staff to buy and rent homes next to the hospital. We've worked closely with all the stakeholders, including extensive consultation, to bring forward a considered scheme that brings additional amenity to the hospital and to the local community. The scheme will deliver a significant number of jobs, including apprenticeships, and will help to boost the local economy. We will be funded by Homes England on this development, and this is most definitely a scheme we are very keen to deliver. I'd like to show a short video, which hopefully helps people sort of just visualise the scheme that we're presenting today. Hope this video helps everybody visualise the scheme, and we are, very proud of the scheme, and we hope it's an exemplar scheme for Liverpool. I thank everybody for their time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any member of the committee have any questions for the developers? Yes, I'll take Councillor Radford first.
Good morning, Councillor Steve Radford. When I've been involved in designs of a lot of the new estates in my own ward and some of the other facilities, we've tended to look at the American principle of a new estate of having one entrance in and one entrance out, because for road transport that prevents through-cut driving and reduces crime. And on this plan, I just checked with John, there's two major entrance points. How does that impact on community safety? I appreciate what you're saying about making it an open plan to the park. I get that for pedestrian traffic, but has there been any consideration and the impact of community safety in the plan? I'm going to be honest, I think a lot of us who represent wards along the loop line has been a nightmare for criminal activity, and I'm wondering if, I understand where the ethos comes from for having open sites, but does that conflict with our objective to create safe space for people who live there? And it just contradicts some of the principles that I would have normally expected on your estate to apply. So I don't know if you could share any thoughts on that.
Just checking I could come in then. Yeah, absolutely. The kind of principle of providing two entrances is about minimising the need for car movement around within the site itself. So the site, as within the characterised zone, that the sort of apartment buildings and primary hospital kind of uses are to the kind of northwest of the site, and the primary residential streets are to the sort of south, so that it promotes car movement around those kind of areas. And we're retaining a very large existing tree that sits outside of Ronald McDonald House's main entrance into the site, that effectively forms a sort of chicane within the site and slows down car movement. Within the actual scheme, hopefully it kind of comes across, you can see there's a lot of high quality public realm that runs down informal streets to all of the sort of side streets. So effectively there's a series of muse streets that comes off a spine road that are all intended to be pedestrian priority spaces, and the spine road will get very minimal movement running down it, working with our highways consultant. So it was a key consideration that it didn't become a kind of cut through from Alder Road, people looking to divert, and the kind of the principle of including the design of the space to promote pedestrian environment first will hopefully discourage people making those movements. And I think probably a more contemporary approach to residential planning is actually about creating permeability and less about creating single entrances and the congestion that those single entrances can cause developments. People don't want to live next to the single entrance into the site, so creating multiple entrances is much favoured in more contemporary developments from our experience. Hopefully that answers your question.
Does that answer your question?
Very convinced by it, if I be truthful, because if you look at the residential roads to the left, there isn't any housing by the entrance points, and if we did accept the engineer's arguments that it doesn't add congestion, then saying we need two access points because it's not going to add congestion doesn't seem compatible. So, but I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your courtesy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Mahoney.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. The first one is about the accessibility of the housing. So how many of the homes are fully wheelchair accessible, and to what standard? I mean, this is in view of some of the comments of the local councillors, especially Councillor Pam Thomas, who've raised this issue. And I'd just like to know the first question: how many of the homes are fully wheelchair accessible?
Would you like to address that, please?
Yeah, so 13% of the development, so your emerging local plan policy is 10% provision of M43 adaptable homes. We're providing 13% of our homes that are M43 adaptable. So Councillor Pam Thomas, I believe I'm right in saying that she withdrew her objection on the basis of accessibility. So we developed the scheme 5 years ago before the emerging policy was even being developed. Obviously, since that's been developed, we've absolutely invested fully in that provision, full M42 compliance and 13% of M43 compliance, which is over and above any other scheme in Liverpool that we understand.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Chair. Second question, if I may, Chair. It's about parking. And I understand the comments that were made that the development is acceptable with respect to parking and traffic, especially with respect to the UDP. If I can just state, as somebody who knows that area reasonably well, they may be acceptable to the UDP, but they're not practical for the local residents. And to say you're selling homes for £350,000 and above, to expect people not to have cars when they've got that kind of money to splash around is, I think, totally unrealistic. And all that's going to happen is there's going to be an overspill of parking into the existing residential areas that's going to lead to a massive problem for those residents. And I'm sure we're going to hear about that in detail coming on. And I do think that the parking plans for this development are totally unrealistic, and these plans are overdevelopment without proper infrastructure in regard to parking. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think that was more of a comment than a question. Would you like to address that, please?
Yes, just to say, obviously, your highways officer is in full agreement that the plans are fully in accordance with policy. And just to respond to your point about the level of parking provision, this approach is common throughout very, very high quality Sterling Prize winning award-winning developments. And it's about people buying into this type of approach. Not everyone wants two cars. This is about people buying into a new way of living, reduced car ownership, looking to the future of more sustainable modes. And this is a known principle that is being applied across many developments.
May I ask
Councillor Mulhoney, yes.
Yeah, can I ask you supplementary on that? I understand that in some developments it is possible to have, I'm not sure whether there's a covenant on the property, that people who buy properties will not be able to buy cars. That's one of the conditions of them moving into those properties. Now, could that not be applied to this case to give some of the local residents assurance that parking will not be a problem for them? Thanks, Chair.
Do you have a further comment?
Yeah, sorry, just to, again, so obviously part of this development, there's a series of TROs being applied within the local area, and we're accepting a covenant within our development that will prevent us being able to apply for a parking permit within the local area. So this is absolutely about people buying in to this way of living on this site, not about buying two cars and parking a car in a local street. It's absolutely about buying into this vision for this site. You're part of the world-class health campus, and that's the principle of what we want to create here.
Chair, can I just...
Thank you.
Can I just respond to that, please? Because I don't think that my point has been addressed. What's been said is they're not going to apply for additional car parking. What they haven't said is that people are still going to be allowed to have multiple cars, which will lead to problems with overspill in the surrounding areas. So it reinforces my point that parking provision in this development is inadequate.
I don't know if there's anything further to say, or if we move on to another topic. Did you have a further comment?
Well, only to say that it's not possible to park in the local areas, but other than that, nothing else to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, this is a massive project. I'm just sort of trying to tease out. On Building A and 4-storey in height, it contains service apartments for use for visitors and hospital staff and visitors. My question is, in terms of the move forward for Alder Hay, how critical is that requirement for that kind of usage on that site?
Would the developer like to respond, please?
It's a requirement the hospital do want because their wish is to release hospital.
I can't hear the word you're saying.
Oh, sorry. It is a requirement for Alder Hey Hospital. They want to release beds by having the step down facility. So for them, it's quite an important part of the campus.
Can I also
Did you get that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
On plot 4, the apartments for autism. Again, I think this was the first time I've been involved in a plan application for apartments for autism. Again, in terms of the Alder Hey and the NHS moving forward, again, is that a critical element of your proposals, or is that just something that's nice to have?
Again, it was a requirement from Alder Hey. They have an autism department, and this is a specialist autism provision that they required.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments from the committee? Thank you. So we now have a number of objectors. Each objector will be allowed up to, but no more than, 3 minutes to address the committee. The committee will only consider and take into account material planning matters. If an objection does not comprise these, then it cannot be taken into consideration by the committee. So I will call, first of all, Graham Winrow to address the committee. Is Graham Winrow not here?
I'm just trying to unmute. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Winrow.
Right, okay. Well, firstly, I would like to ask that the following be minuted in the record of this meeting. I'd ask for assurances from the members of the committee that the involvement of the ex-mayor, Mayor Anderson, and the chair of the committee, Councillor Conception, in the political meddling that has gone before regarding Alder Hey and its long-held desire to get residential developments onto the site shall in no way influence the decision today. Yeah, I say this because recently it's come to the attention of the community that the former mayor entered into an arrangement with the trust in April 15, which would see LCC and Alder Hey set up a joint venture to share profits from an ill-fated 2016 application to build over 400 residential dwellings on the site. I say recently come to the attention because both Councillor Conception and another councillor at the time were chair and treasurer of the local Friends group, and both failed to inform members of the group that such an arrangement existed. Councillor Conception continues to involve himself in all matters relating to Alder Hey and Springfield Park, continually seeking to be viewed by the trust as a key stakeholder. So I'd like that placed in record, please.
Mr. Winrow, before you proceed, if you could mute your microphone, please. I just need to make a formal announcement for the committee. Thank you. For the benefit of members of the committee and people viewing the live stream, I will just reiterate comments made by myself and the Deputy Chair. Matters on a material planning basis are the only matters which will be heard and considered at today's meeting. Matters relating to the administration activities of independent friends and community groups are not relevant material planning considerations, nor are matters related to former elected representatives. In relation to the chair of this committee, the chair has clearly declared and stated interest and is not taking part in proceedings, has no involvement on and no influence on today's decision. For purposes of clarity, the planning committee is not a whipped committee. Members of the committee have been through vigorous formal training on the planning procedures at local and national level, and members vote based on their own assessment and determination of each individual application on its respective merits. So, Mr. Winrow, if you do wish to continue to address committee, please to matters on a planning basis only. Thank you.
That's fine. That's fine. I believe parts of the consultation process carried out by the applicants have misled the community in the detail of the claims being made. On its web pages, from which planning report says has generated 86 pro forma representations of support for the application, it states under a heading support health that the redevelopment of the former hospital site will provide valuable investment for Children's Hospital, generating millions of pounds to reinvest in frontline care. Members of the committee will have seen Alder Hay's own statements of support in the planning documents, and nowhere that they mention these millions of pounds being generated to support frontline care. The claims simply aren't true, and I believe have misled the community. I also believe it's wholly inappropriate for the committee to be asking the developer what and what isn't Alder Hay's views and requirements. That should be asked of Alder Hay, because I don't believe 13 autism apartments are a requirement of Alder Hay. That's certainly not the information they've given to me. Regarding the traffic, I believe the impact on the traffic stated in the plan report is wholly inaccurate. It does not take into account the impact of the additional traffic coming from application 21F 0852, which the committee has also been asked to consider today. Members of the committee have been asked to believe that the development of this scale, 248 residential units, 60,000 square feet of office space, will result in less traffic in and around the Alder Hay site. These assumptions are made based upon a flawed expectation that most apartments in the plan should be occupied by Alder Hay staff who, being on site, won't have vehicles. This will they, won't they question regarding staff occupancy is critical, with the applicant's assumption being based upon a staff survey undertaken by Alder Hay. However, the survey merely asks if on-site accommodation would be of interest. It makes no mention of rents as high as £950 per calendar month. Such rent is way out of the reach of the bulk of Alder Hay staff and will result on these apartments going onto the open market with unimaginable impacts upon the surrounding roads, the air quality and the parking issues that already exist. I live opposite Alder Hay. I see the impact. I see helicopters coming into Alder Hay fairly frequently. It's the helipad. Now my house shakes when the helicopter comes over. So I question why you would have a 5-storey development in such proximity to a helipad. I'd also question, I'm not an expert on autism. I have no objection at all to any parts of this scheme that provide clinical care. I have no issue with the autism apartments, but not being an expert, I would question whether they should be so close to a helipad. And that's the basis of my objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winrow. Does any member of the committee have any questions for Mr. Winrow? Thank you. So we will move on now to Keith Jones, please. Is Keith Jones present?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can do, thank you, Mr. Jones.
Right. Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a local resident, and also in 2016, became chair of the Alder Hay Action Group when the local residents were sent messages with regards to a development of 424 homes. And we fought against this, and this was turned down by Mr. Anderson, and I hope you can see this in front of me. Can you see this? And this, hello?
No, we're not able to see anything, I'm afraid.
Well, let me get my camera on. Can you see that? Yes. Alder Hay back down. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to take you back to 2011 when Alder Hay called a public meeting in Broughton Hall School and asked for permission to build on Springfield Park, which the public supported this. But unfortunately, it took away 3 full-size football pitches, 2 bowling greens, a kiddies play area, 2 full-size tennis grass courts, and a beautiful rose garden, on the understanding that they would give back to this land when the old hospital is demolished, 9.4 hectares plus. Unfortunately, for the past 10 years, the youth of today have been denied these facilities. What have we got today? Nothing. An arrangement was drawn up by Liverpool City Council and Alder Hay And this is that arrangement. It's called the 106 agreement. And I have the official agreement here in front of me. And part and parcel of this is, and was stated, and I have 30 statements in front of me to the national press by Alder Hey, that when the Victorian units are knocked down, they will be replaced by parkland and become a futuristic park to be proud of in this city. The hospital will be surrounded by parkland. So to this 106 agreement, it clearly states, and I have it in front of me, and if you can see the blue line across there, and that clearly states when the hospital was opened in 2015 by the Queen, the retaining land will be used for further clinical and hospital development. This is badly needed by Alder Hey, because in 2015 they realised that the hospital was not big enough, and they started acquiring business premises along Eaton Road, and they were turned down because they didn't want to sell them. So what have Alder Hey done? They've gone off site. Number one, they've been renting Eaton Road Police Station for the past 3 years for the IT department. The maintenance department doesn't exist on the hospital site now because the old maintenance department has just been demolished. So they're trying to acquire the Riverside housing unit 2 miles further down East Prescott Road. The maintenance department 2 miles off site. They've also acquired the Knotty Ash nursing home, which is adjacent to the loop line. Unfortunately, this has just been vandalised by youths and burnt down. What was this for? It was for the records department for the hospital. The records department for the hospital. Just recently, they've gone off site with the Thomas Lane playing fields because this site is going to be required for this atrocious development for the parking of 100 cars. So they're paying security staff in Thomas Lane to make sure the cars are kept in.
Mr. Jones, could you draw your remarks to a close now, please? You've had your 3 minutes.
Right. It's on these grounds, ladies and gentlemen, I propose that this development is turned down flatly and the land is purchased back by the hospital, which is part of the agreement, and the hospital can benefit by building these units on the site. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think quite a lot of those comments will be addressed by the planning officer, but does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Jones? No, thank you.
Can I just say this, lady, Mr. Chair? Has anybody seen the 106 agreement?
You had time now, Mr.
Committee?
Move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Can I ask David Rudkin to address the committee, please?
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thanks a lot. Okay. David Rudkin, local resident, objecting on the following grounds. Planning history. Consideration of this proposal is in direct opposition to the previous planning permission for the relocation of the hospital. The land is designated as land for hospital use, which the community supported. There's been no justification to move away from the usage, and in terms of the Section 106 agreement, the reinstatement of the park has not been met. In terms of scale and density, the design is contrary to this policy, your policies of H5 and H1, as the proposals do not respect the character of the surrounding area in scale, density and layout. The amenity of the existing and future residents is compromised. The residential density of this development is 91 units per hectare. These are city centre densities. This is a suburban area, and as such, densities should be around 45 units per hectare. This is more than double the density of the area and totally out of character. The scale of the area is mainly two-storey with one 3-storey residential block on the Alder Road, Eaton Road corner. This development of 4, 5 and 6 storeys is totally out of scale, particularly plot 1 at the junction of Alder and Eaton Road. This is acknowledged by your urban design officer in his report, paragraph 3.8. The applicant has sought to justify these building heights in relation to the surrounding townscape. Although it is acknowledged this justification is not necessarily agreed with in its entirety by the council's urban design officer. And also in paragraph 3.10, the urban design officer considered that this applicant has not convincingly justified proposed massing of these buildings and has not reflected the officer's design suggestions in the final design. This is a full planning application, and once granted, the council will have no opportunity to review the design. Given the reservations of the officers, this should not be put forward for approval. Recently, development of the site in West Derby was capped at 3 storeys, as officers said it would be out of character. So why is 3, 4 and 5 6-storey development suitable in this location? The design is also contrary to policy H3 within the city, where providers have been asked to provide a minimum of 20% affordable housing. There are no indications of rental or house prices, such as the offer to NHS staff given first refusal provides no guarantee. Why is a private developer supported by Homes England funding not being asked to meet the basics of affordable housing standards when all affordable housing providers in the city have to meet this standard? With regard to highway development, the development of 240 units, 750 new occupants and 60,000 square foot of office space only seems to require some tactile paving. This seems an underestimate of the impact of the highway network given the current congestion problems we all experience. The proposal is also not supported by your agriculturalist.
Now, please.
Yes, okay. Well, the final one is really, unfortunately, we all support Alder Hay within the community, but there's a petition of over 2,000 people objecting to this, which gives you the idea of the strength of feeling within West Derby. I would ask you to reject the application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Woodkin. Does anybody have any questions or comments for him? No, thank you. Could I ask other people who were on the Zoom call to turn off their microphones, please? We were getting a little bit of feedback when that previous speaker was speaking. Could I now call on Stephen Guy to address the committee?
If you would press the button labelled with a red, thank you. Yes,
right.
It's on that.
Okay. It's not made for tall people. I speak as the chair of the West Derby Society and local resident whose house overlooks this site. The West Derby Society notes the officer's recommendation but objects to the application on the following grounds. The Society believes that this whole matter, if approved today, should be referred to an independent planning inquiry. First, I wish to list the Society's objections to the plans before the committee today. Our principal objections are to housing and retail, while we have no objections to hospital-related development. These plans will overcrowd this site, which is not zoned for housing in the City Council's long-term development plans. The development is not in keeping with the local area, which is predominantly low-rise private housing. The new development will dominate neighbouring properties and create privacy issues, particularly Ronald MacDonald House, often accommodating vulnerable and distressed people. There will be unsustainable increases in traffic, noise and nuisance. There is insufficient parking both on-site and locally, where a residents-only parking scheme is now in operation. The development will impair local traffic access on an already overburdened road network. Finally, there is much more important reason this application should be rejected today. Housing, retail and other non-hospital development work were not on the original planning application, which only included Alder Hey Hospital and Springfield Park. In all the public consultation before the original application was approved, no mention of housing or retail was made, only a hospital in the park. We eventually discovered that there were secret plans for housing which were not revealed. It is obvious why the Alder Hey NHS Trust and City Council did not disclose the plans. There would be uproar, and any plans to build on parkland existing since 1907 would be opposed. Instead, both the Trust and the Council kept silent. However, behind the scenes, they continued to plot without informing the residents or electorate. In 2015, they planned to split profits 50-50 for any housing development. Plans for more than 400 houses announced late in 2016 were hastily withdrawn after a public outcry. These current plans emerged when the government joined the fray and
Could you start
ordered that
bringing your remarks to a close, please?
the alleged surplus of NHS land be sold off. This is not surplus land, as the application of off-site land by the Trust reveals. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have it? Yes, Councillor Radford has a question for you, I believe.
Mr. Guy, I understand you live in the immediate vicinity from your opening remarks.
I overlooked the time.
Could you describe the level of traffic on Alder Road and Eaton Road at present, or the key access points to the vicinity, to the community?
It's like all the roads in West Derby, it is extremely busy, particularly during the school run time, morning and afternoon. This is one of the reasons the residents' parking scheme was brought in, which restricts, as it says, residents only. It's not quite as bad as Mill Lane, by the junction with Queen's Drive, which is appalling. And I was involved in that as well, which was approved by the developments round there. But if this plan goes ahead, I can see it'll be a nightmare for local residents. These roads are not made for all this development, which was, as we've seen from the official presentation, there will be a lot of people living on this site and they'll all have cars, despite what the committee has been told.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Cardwell.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you talked about a residents-only parking scheme. What are the hours of operation of that scheme? Is it 24/7? Is it?
No, it's 7 in the morning till 7 at night, weekdays. Thanks.
Thank you. And I believe Councillor Mahoney has a question.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Mr. Guy. I'd like to ask, in terms of visitors to this site, given that there will be housing and retail, including a gym, a nursery and offices, how much will the parking associated with those visitors affect the surrounding residents?
Well, it's bad enough now. There's a row of shops opposite this site, and the cars are coming and going on the curb and everything else. It'll be a total nightmare, I can tell you now. I don't need a crystal ball to tell you that. I live there. I was born and bred in West Derby. I've lived most of my life in West Derby. I know the issues with traffic. We don't want plans which will exacerbate them. We want sensible plans, and this site is overdeveloped. There's too much in it, despite what we're being told. About we are talking as a local society and a local residents that we need this to be a sensible plan. And we know that if this is built, this is, which in our view is a hideous plan anyway, it will create on the infrastructure, and nobody's mentioned schools, nobody's mentioned other aspects, and the impact on the immediate environment will be enormous. And as you was intimating about the traffic, it's not only the traffic, of course, there's other points which I've said, but the traffic will be one of the most major impacts on our on our neighbourhood, and that's why we're urging you to reject it.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Guy? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I now call on David Abe to address the committee, please?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for letting me speak at the meeting today. The site and what surrounds it has a long and complicated history. We watched the whole site being broken up into pieces to provide multiple plan applications, and the impact of these should all be considered together before deciding on today's proposal. In all this time, and 6 years since the new hospital opened, no parkland has been returned to our community. None. Despite us being told this was a simple build a new hospital and then return the park project. I tell you that because today's proposal relies heavily on there being a fully restored park in place, something the NHS Trust have been unable to do so far after all these years, and brings into doubt their ability.
Could I ask you to speak a little louder, please? Some people are having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, yeah. I tell you that because today's proposal relies heavily on there being a fully restored park in place, something the NHS Trust have been unable to do so far after all these years, and brings into doubt their ability to ever do so before the potential development is completed, if ever at all. Without it, where will this project get its clean air, open space, and where will it drain its surface water to? Without the proposed parks, swales, which in any case have a limited capacity and will likely overspill, and was stated by LCC in the original land exchange agreement, they should not be in the park. The park should be fully reinstated before this application is considered. There's lots of reasons to reject this plan application today, or at the very least a decision. From the not fit for purpose traffic survey, not taking into account the growth in the site since the 2 years it was carried out, to the sheer lack of parking. We hear this site will not require car use, but that's relatively untrue in the suburbs, and this area particularly has no rail or cycle options to link this site to the city centre. Even if potential buyers buy into this project, what about visitors to them and their needs? What about visitors to retail options? The oversized buildings and the impact they will have on the sensitive nature of the bereavement centre, Ronald Old House and the surrounding area. I'm also disgusted that on top of the mature trees lost from Springfield Park due to the new hospital build, that this application proposes to remove 75% of the trees on the site, including a well-established oak tree. If plan permission is refused today, any one of the large reasons, Alder will have the option to buy the land back for their own future clinical use, something the 106 agreement stated. We hear from step places and Alder have a need and will build up step-down services, offices and staff accommodation, but given that Alder will then be paying rent on those forever, does this not amount to privatisation? And why would Alder not build these themselves if they believe they are required? In any case, no substantial worthwhile evidence has been provided to confirm these units are needed. For example, staff surveys did not include the cost of these buildings. You saying yes to this plan application today will land tonight forever, ensuring no further growth is possible and will set an ongoing rent that will need to be paid for by Alder. At the very least, a decision should be delayed until the
Could you draw your remarks to a close now, please?
Yeah. At the very least, a decision on this should be delayed until up-to-date surveys are carried out to consider the impact of the multiple applications still to be signed off on the huge site. Despite the trust that Alder only applying for here and there, I ask you to please say no to this plan application today to please save Alder for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. A? No. So we'll move on now to Lynn Edwards, please.
Ooh.
Lynn Edwards, are you present on the call? Seems like she's not there. So I will now call on Stephen McNally, please. Do we have Stephen McNally present? No? Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Harry Doyle.
Steve McNally.
As his name broke down.
There's Harry Doyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for letting me address you today. First of all, I'd like to say that obviously there's considerable objections to this application today, and I too am objecting to it. I would like to thank the developer, though, for the communications that we have had as ward councillors, but there are a number of things that have been missed in terms of our objections on this. First of all, I would just like to say that you can see a strength of feel in the community about the number of times they have been let down. But sticking to today's committee, I think that first of all, the tree removal aspect of this has been missed, and there's a lot of mature trees along Alder Road, and I think that's a huge disappointment to scrap those trees. As I said before, this is not what was promised in the Section 106 agreement, the original Section 106 agreement. There's an overdevelopment on this site, and actually, if you saw the visuals before, the feel of that park in the area is completely obliterated by this development. I don't want the committee to underestimate at all the impact on the highways network around our area. It's been mentioned already today, but we've had media interest over the years with regards to the amount of traffic around West Derby and Knotty Ash. And one thing I want to focus on mainly today is around the parking issue, because it has been raised and a number of questions have come up. One of my biggest problems since becoming a councillor for the area in 2018 has been parking in this area, and the delay in the instruction of the TRO has been it's really hampered local residents. It's been decades and decades that our local residents have had to put up with overspill parking from Alder Hay, to the point where Alder Hay are actually now renting land off the City Council out down the road in Thomas Lane to fulfil their parking requirements. It's a real, I think, it damages the application that you're not expanding the TRO to cover this area, because if this is approved today, we're creating a problem for those potential residents moving in to this development. All those problems that current residents around the site have had over the decades, as I say, will just be introduced for these residents here, and I think that is a real missed opportunity to include that. Finally, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak, the Ronald McDonald's house has been mentioned as well. I think that's been missed in the objections, because the clear walkway, which is promised to the local community, does not exist in these plans, and I think that's a missed opportunity as well. And just finally, sorry, as it's mentioned, our community's been let down on a number of occasions, where it's been delayed TRO, the delayed reinstatements of the park. Please don't let the community down further by going against, allowing Alder Hay to go against the previous agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Councillor Doyle? No? Thank you very much. I will now ask the team leader for North Liverpool to address the committee. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Planning Committee. My name is John Hayes. I am the team leader for development management covering the north of the city. Chair, you've got a very comprehensive report in front of you, running to some 70 pages, and you've had a very thorough presentation from the architects and their agents and from the developer, which has set out clearly for you as members of the Planning Committee what is being proposed and the various issues that are pertinent to the consideration of this application. I'll take you through the report, Chair, and then I'll deal with some of the comments and representations that have been made orally this morning. In relation to the main point that seems to have come out through the representations around the promises that were made to the community by Alder Hay, I want to just first begin by repeating what was said by the applicant's agent. This is a brownfield site that is now in the ownership of the applicant. For you as a planning committee this morning, it is for you to consider that application on its merits. The issues around the replacement park are addressed in the report. They're addressed in the background, and there is some history of what has happened there. However, as has been said, this is an application which has to be considered on its own particular merits. Just for clarity, this committee has previously granted planning permission for a replacement park in 2019, and that is illustrated on the plans that were accompanying this planning committee report and has been circulated again this morning. So You can see exactly where that park is to be provided, but as I say, it's not necessary to consider that element as part of your consideration of this particular application, other than insofar as the two relate to each other. So just moving on, Chair, in terms of the principle of development, again, this is and never has been open space. It has always been part of the hospital's estate. It is now being cleared, and you saw a photograph of that in the presentation. And the proposal in terms of the principle of development is considered entirely appropriate, given that it is brownfield land, given that it is adjacent to the hospital, and provides that mixed-use development profile. In terms of some of the other issues that have been picked up, so for example, in relation to the gym and the creche and the retail facilities, starting first with the retail facilities in particular, there was a retail impact statement submitted with the application that has been carefully considered, and it has been concluded that it would not cause harm, given the small amount of retail being proposed to nearby centres. Indeed, I think it's fair to say that these would be a complementary offering to the existing neighbourhood centres on Eaton Road. In terms of the gym, again, that's not considered to be in any way harmful to nearby centres. And in relation to the creche, that is a replacement facility. And actually, picking up on the objection that was made earlier, this particular creche provided through this application will actually provide a drop-off point and some associated parking with it, which the existing creche does not. So in terms of the principle of development on the retail and the residential, it's considered appropriate. In relation to the commercial uses, again, they are considered to be part of the hospital campus. So both the offices and the service departments, there are conditions being proposed within this committee report that would ensure that they are retained and used solely in connection with the hospital. So there's no chance, for example, that the offices might become used by some other organisation, and likewise the service departments are only to be used in connection with the hospital. So for all of those reasons, Chair, your office has considered that the broader principle of development on this site is appropriate. Some issues were also raised then, Chair, about the design and layout, and obviously we've included the comments in their entirety from our urban design officer. And again, we've gone to great lengths in the report to discuss the justification and the rationale for allowing the scheme, particularly some of the larger elements on the corner of Alder Road and Eaton Road, and where they are juxtaposed with the both the existing hospital development but also the residential development. And again, I think that's been explained to you both in the presentation and the agenda papers. There is the surrounding scale, particularly along parts of Alder Road and further up Eaton Road, is certainly more two-storey, more suburban in its scale. But I think your officers have concluded that this has to be read as part of the overall hospital campus. And so the larger properties in particular are considered to read as an extension of those buildings that currently face onto Eaton Road. So in terms of the scale on that Eaton Road frontage, your officers consider they're entirely appropriate. The scale then drops down to the more suburban scale, but again, it reads very much as part of an overall campus. And in terms of the design and the layout, we consider it's appropriate in particular to have larger properties facing onto the park. That is an established urban design principle to allow surveillance and so on. Again, we are satisfied that that particular element of the residential scheme is appropriate for the context and for what it's trying to achieve. So I won't say any more about that, Chair, other than in relation to the wider issue of residential amenity, where, again, there's a section within the report that talks about some of the relationships between particularly the blocks of houses. That relationship is below your normal interface standards. And again, we've provided clarity within the report why we consider that as is acceptable. The applicants, through their architects, have provided a lot of justification to demonstrate that there would not be any issues for future residents around amenity, overlooking and so on. And that's by clever architecture, use of angled windows and so on. They've also submitted daylight and sunlight reports again, which we've had regard to in making our recommendation in relation to that particular aspect. Heritage matters, Chair, again, are fully dealt with in the report. I won't go into that in any great detail because it's not been something that's picked up by the speakers. There is a couple of pages on that in the agenda papers. The conclusion is quite simply that there will be very limited harm. It's at the very, very lower end of the scale in terms of potential harm, and clearly there are wider regeneration benefits that are associated with this development. In terms of inclusive design, I know Councillor Maloney picked up on that particular question, and the answer was given to it by the architect. Again, paragraph 6.6, Chair, repeats what you've heard by the architect. 13% is part M43 and the rest of it is part M42. So entirely in accordance with the local plan standards, in fact, slightly exceeding the local plan standards in relation to part M43. I'm going to leave highway and transport matters, Chair, because I recognise that, again, they are a particularly important consideration for some of the speakers this morning and for members of this committee. And I will ask my colleague, Andy Dingwall, to come in a moment to talk about that wider issue. Suffice to say, however, that there has been a great deal of discussion through the application process and supporting information being submitted with the application by way of a transport assessment that has been very, very carefully considered by your officers, and they are happy with the conclusions that have been reached within that. Chair, Councillor Doyle mentioned the issue around trees, and again, there is quite some lengthy commentary within the report about the trees and the landscaping. In particular, Chair, there are some trees along Alder Road which have raised some concerns by our tree officer, who acknowledges that whilst efforts are being made to retain them, there is clearly a longer term possibility that they won't survive given the proximity of some of the residential development. So there are conditions that are being recommended to you that require the details of the digging of trenches and works around the site and making sure we have an understanding of the materials that are going to go nearby. But equally, there is also an acknowledgement in the report that if the trees can't be retained for whatever reason, because that they're found to be not suitable when they actually get on site to retain them, then the conclusions of your officers is that notwithstanding any tree loss, there would be sufficient replacement throughout the entirety of the site by way of the landscaping proposed, but also in addition, Chair, through the legal agreement, which requires for a sum in lieu of street trees. So there will be 7 street trees within the layout itself, and a lot of landscaping within the curtilage of individual properties as well, and quite high quality public rain. On top of that, as I say, there will also be a contribution towards street trees. Chair, just in relation to a number of other matters, again, things like drainage and contaminated land have all been looked at and considered through the application process, and we're happy with the various reports and conclusions that have been reached within those reports. Finally, Chair, just in relation to legal agreement, I've mentioned already the trees. There would also be a sum for open space provision as well of 188,000, together with some smaller contributions towards public art and monitoring of the associated legal agreement. I think I've largely covered the issues raised, Chair, through my summing up there. If there are any further questions, however, I am happy to respond to them. But I think before I do that, can I just defer to my colleague Andy Dingwall, who will take you through some of the highways and parking issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, let's have the comments from our highways officer, before we take any questions or comments. If you'd like to address us.
Thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. Just picking up on the points there that have been made by the objectors, there's two key issues really here. I think the suggestion is that there's not enough parking provided on this site to accommodate the demand that will be generated by the various uses. And secondly, that there'll be too much traffic generated by the development, which will impact on the surrounding highway network. Well, those two things really are in conflict with one another, because if you provide more parking, you get more traffic. If you provide less parking, you get less traffic. So the starting point for this development was not to provide the maximum amount of car parking that the developer could in accordance with the SPD, but to make a careful assessment as to what the demand for parking for the various uses will be across the whole of the site, and to try to provide for that rather than to provide for the maximum. And that's the exercise that the developer's gone through with their transport consultants. And we're satisfied with the levels of car parking that's provided across the site for the various uses on that basis of the information that's been provided to support that argument. The second point again is in relation to the traffic impact. Then there's various scenarios that have been modelled through the transport assessment, including a consideration of the base traffic flows, which included the traffic that will be associated with the temporary car park use that's on the site. And once that's removed from the network in terms of the traffic, and the new development traffic is introduced, what the impact of that will be. And it's negligible. In fact, in some scenarios, the amount of traffic is less than what will be generated if the existing temporary car park use was to remain on site. But nonetheless, an assessment's been taken with that removed and the development traffic added in. And when you look at the impact, there's probably two key junctions within the surrounding highway network that you would say are probably most impacted, and that would be the Queen's Drive, Alder Road junction and the Alder Road, Eaton Road junction. And if you look at the detail that's come out of the assessment, for example, in the junction of Queen's Drive and Alder Road, you're talking about an additional 36 vehicles in the AM peak and 37 vehicles in the PM peak being added through that junction. When you look at that, it's not significant considering the considerable volume of traffic that goes through there. In reality, you're looking at one extra vehicle on average every couple of minutes. And it's a similar situation really with the Eaton Road and Alder Road junction. Again, 21 extra vehicles in the AM peak and 20 in the PM peak. Again, you're probably looking at one extra vehicle every 2 or 3 minutes. So again, it's negligible in terms of the impact, and certainly not an impact that we could consider to be severe. And therefore we didn't have any objections to the impact on the surrounding highway network. We're relatively comfortable. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I just pick up on that wider,
yes,
that wider highway point as well? And I think it's important to emphasise that at national level, national planning policy framework gives encouragement to more sustainable forms of development. And again, if you look at paragraph 7.2 onwards of your agenda papers, we quote a number of sections from the recently updated National Planning Policy Framework. So paragraphs 110 to 113, for example, I won't read it all out. Appropriate opportunities to promote sustainable transport modes can or have been taken up given the type of development in its location. And then further down, within this context, development applications for development should give priority first to pedestrians and cycle movements, both within the scheme and with neighbouring areas, etc. So there's a lot of support at national level to ensure this type of development, this kind of consideration rather, is given within development.
Thank you. I'm going to now see if there are any questions or comments from members of the committee for either of our officers, and I know that Councillor Radford has a comment.
There's two aspects. If I can just deal with the highways issues, and I say this with respect to the officers, I don't think there's been a single planning application I can recall of significance where the planning department have said there would be a detrimental significant impact. I think at one point they even told me 500,000 visitors to Anfield football ground wouldn't create any additional car parking problems at Anfield. And so, I'm actually looking at page 29, and I do actually sometimes wonder, the more they write, is it designed to make sure we less understand what's being suggested? Comparison of these modal outputs to those of the development added show slight but not significant detriment in the operation of modal junctions. I think that's gobbledygook to say there will be some detrimental impact on congestion, but we're not wanting you to know what it is. Mind-blowing we get reports like this, but I sit here and I know the area well, and I would say we did a fantastic development on Stonycroft Retail Park. It's been much more successful than any of us imagined, but it has had a detrimental impact on congestion. It was something, I will apologise, I underrated, but it has had a really detrimental impact on traffic flow on Queen's Drive. And I'm really wondering if we're going to have a retail park at the front here, plus a gymnasium, I'm just finding whether comparison of these modal outputs, the development added show slight but not significant detrimental impact. Well, actually, I'm not sure if I'm convinced. And then if I may take on a different concern on, here it is. Sorry, there was another very strange phraseology which I was trying to interpret. On page 41, these aren't typical brick colours in the surrounding residential environment or that of the wider city Liverpool area. However, these brick colours are used with conviction and with widespread use throughout the site creates a coherence and established a distinct sense of place and character. I wonder if that really translates into we've jumped a Lego style development totally out of keeping with the area, because it does look totally different, housing contexture and brick coloration and everything to the area, and it doesn't look compatible to any other part of West Derby Village I know. And I do have concerns over the community safety aspect. A lot of us have parks in our area. Only yesterday I attended a meeting at Brexide Park over security problems in the area, and I'm worried about the site being open-ended, and are we going to create a crisis in the future? But can I ask, I mean, the Queen's English is a marvellous language. Could we just have a bit more plain English in some of the reports? Some of us might actually understand what's being told to us.
Thank you. Shall we take the highways question first, as that was the first question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think in my summing up of this application before, I tried my best to explain it in the simplest terms possible by talking about the numbers of additional vehicles per minute that would likely, or the number of additional vehicles per hour that would likely be generated, and how that averages off across the hour. So I would hope that Councillor Radford could understand it in the terms that I was explaining it there in my summing up. But it's difficult sometimes, because when we're dealing with transport consultants, the work that we ask them to do is very, very technical in nature, and they do that technical work, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time to assess from a highway officer's point of view. And when we provide our comments to the planning officers, we try to include the right level of detail that explains our assessment, but also explains it in a way in which, you know, the layperson can understand to a degree. You know, we don't tend to put an awful lot of technical detail into that for that reason. And I hope I explained that in my summing up before. The point being made about highway officers perhaps, you know, maybe not objecting to planning applications that perhaps do have a greater impact on the highway network. I would go along with that to a large degree, but what I would explain to Councillor Radford is that we work very closely alongside the transport consultants to explain to them what would be acceptable, what wouldn't be acceptable, and how the methodology that they use to assess the development needs to be presented to us. So it's quite often the case that we get to a point whereby we're able to support the application, but that's through the hard work of the officers in my team working alongside the developers professional team as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And can we move on to the issues of appearance and
I'll do my best, Chair. So I think these are the comments of our urban design officer. I think in plain English, there's a recognition that the buff tone that is being suggested as part of the development, and which you've seen on the images presented by the architect, are not necessarily entirely consistent with the surrounding area, but there is equally a recognition that what you are trying to create here is a completely new townscape. And it's, as I said earlier, it's very much part of that overall campus feel as part of the wider hospital development and integrating into the park.
I think there was a question about security as well. I don't know if there's anything else to add on the issue of the entrances and exits to this.
All I would say, Chair, in relation to this issue of community safety, the design principles which have underpinned this development are entirely in accordance with accepted and well-recognised urban design principles which take into account community safety, the idea of permeability through estates, not having them on a single access point or surrounded by fencing, making sure that they open, permeable, legible. They're all very, very important urban design principles which have been fundamental to the master planning exercise that the architects have done here. So I personally don't see any issues around community safety associated with this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney was next, and then Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Chair. My questions and comments are about parking and traffic. In terms of the officer's comments that more parking leads to more traffic and less parking leads to less traffic, I think that's an oversimplification and isn't strictly relevant to this development. I think if you look at a hospital and campus type scenario, inadequate parking leads to more driving around looking for parking spaces. And if that involves a parent trying to drop their child to accident and emergency because that child has had an accident, then I don't think it is acceptable. Whereas it might be acceptable to some, if we look at other developments in the city where the Strand, the chaos created there, Lime Street, the chaos created there, that's leading to traffic congestion, reduced traffic coming into the city. The strategy is clearly to dissuade people from coming into the city centre, and the consequent loss of business to some of the city centre businesses and shops is deemed, again I say by some, to be acceptable. In this circumstances, I don't believe that strategy is acceptable. We're talking about a hospital primarily here, and we know what's going to happen. If people can't park when they're going to the gym in whatever facilities are available, they'll use up the car parking spaces that should be available for parents dropping off their children to the hospital. And it's fine to say that if there's two parents in the car, one can go with the child whilst the other one drives to somewhere to park, but that isn't always possible. So I think this, in terms of sustainability and in terms of functionality, is not an acceptable strategy in this circumstance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to address that, please, Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think in terms of the use of the parking spaces within the hospital site itself, that's down to Alder Hey Hospital to manage that appropriately. And I know that they do have dedicated areas for drop-off at the emergency, the A&E department. And they do have a management plan in place to control how the parking spaces within the multi-storey car park are used and allocated as well. I think it's also worth making the point that Alder Hey have been working really hard to develop a really meaningful and effective travel plan for that site. And they're absolutely committed to reducing the dependence upon people travelling by car. They want to be able to allow people to walk and to cycle and to use public transport and to maximise the use of those sustainable modes to travel to and from the site, and accept, you know, when a parent's got a poorly child and needs urgent attention and they do have access to a car, they will by default jump into the car, and absolutely you would expect nothing less. But it's all of the other uses on the hospital site that could be looked at in a different way, such that they're not dependent upon car use. You know, staff, for example, you know, even some visitors who are visiting longer term may choose more sustainable modes of transport. And that's, as I say, something Alder Hey Hospital are absolutely committed to. But I think the general comment about, you know, the suggestion of the congestion that's being created on the Strand and at Lime Street, well, that's understandable given that the roadworks are ongoing at the moment, and there will absolutely, without question, be disruption, and people need to accept there'll be disruption while those works are carried out. But, you know, it's the intention that when we make substantial changes to the highway network, we're not intending to cater for vehicular motorised traffic these days. We do need to cater for that, so it doesn't snarl up the network to such an extent that the city becomes gridlocked. But what we need to be doing is prioritising our attention towards more sustainable modes of travel, and that's why, you know, with both of those schemes, for example, significant improved cycle facilities, cycling infrastructure is being introduced, as well as enhancements for pedestrians as well. So the balance maybe now, everybody really needs to recognise that the balance needs to shift away from motorised vehicular traffic, not least because of the impact on the climate and the environment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to pick up on what John said in relation to the planning rules and the stuff that happens with traffic and developments of new legislation, and how do we develop these wonderful estates, and then we look at the Easby estates, or the new Easby estates in Kirkdale, and we've done exactly that. You know, applied the rules and regulations that John said we could, and what we've developed is an absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare, with rat runs through from Stanley Road onto Westminster Road, children, pets, pedestrians all in danger, and pleading with highways to do something about it. Supplied money to highways, nothing happens. So whilst I accept, John, that you're working within the rules and regulations, you know, sometimes those rules and regulations don't apply to parts of Liverpool. And you know, my concern on this development is, are we creating another rat run like we have done on the Easby estate? So you know, I want some reassurance that we're not creating a rat run, or if there's a danger of a rat run being created, or shortcuts or whatever. I don't know the area. So if we're creating that kind of stuff, what are we going to do? What can we do to ensure that we don't create that?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I may, just picking up on Councillor Hanson's point there about the Easby estate, I acknowledge the comment that he's made in relation to that. This is a very different type of development. I'm not sure if we're able to get a master plan back on the screen, but certainly members have already got a plan anyway. You'll see on that plan of the layout that there's only 2 points in and out. There is a single spine road with a number of access roads off for parking. The only bit that's going to be adopted, my understanding, is that spine road. The rest of it will be in the control of the developer. So there isn't a rat run to anywhere or from anywhere. The movement that is facilitated through this development is cycle and pedestrian movement. So as you heard through the presentation, there is effectively a boulevard that runs from Eaton Road into the new park that's being proposed, and then obviously there's quite a high amount of public realm within the overall development. But the only access road, if you like, is from Alder Road in a U shape back onto Alder Road, so an in and an out.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions? No. I'd like to thank all the speakers today. I think we've really examined this application in close detail, so thank you to everybody for your contributions to that. So I'll now move to a recommendation. Can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Chair, can I propose an amendment, please?
Councillor Radford did indicate first, Councillor Maloney, so Councillor Radford, please.
I'd like to move the application be not approved. But also, I think the design features don't take account of community safety, because I do have a worry that we're creating an open access to the park and through residential areas where there's no barriers. And I think those who've got parks and areas know that can give us difficulties. And lastly, I think it is visually out of keeping with the surrounding communities. It's almost like a Legoland being just dumped in the middle of West Derby. And I think it really is out of keeping out the features. I think it's visually detrimental immunity to the area. So on those 4 grounds, I like us to reject the application. I don't know if there's anything Pat would like to interpret, rather than have 2 amendments, just to save time for the committee. Is there anything you'd like to add, Pat?
Chair, I think my amendment is incompatible with Councillor Radford's. It's different, so but I'm happy to support second Councillor Radford's amendment and then come to my amendment later on because it is different. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, councillors. Just for benefit of those viewing proceedings today, we have a valid amendment from Councillor Radford which sets out 4 proposed reasons for refusing the application: that of insufficient parking provision, negative impacts on the adjacent highway network, negative impacts on community safety, and the incongruous appearance of proposed development being out of character with that of the wider area. So that summarises your amendment, I believe. So we will now vote on the amendment before us. So voting we will take in sequence. So firstly, the chair's vote, please. So 4 is in favour of the amendment, against is against the amendment, and abstain is by definition abstaining. So your vote, please, Chair.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Radford. For the benefit of the public record, the voting is 2 members voting for, 4 members voting against, no abstentions, therefore the amendment falls. We now revert to Councillor Maloney, who I believe has a second amendment to move.
Thanks, Chair. My amendment is the additional conditions, condition 51, the creche hours of operation, which were going to be limited by that additional condition that was tabled today, that those hours of operation be not included in that condition, so that the nursery can operate 24 hours a day. And the reason I'm suggesting this is because I would hazard that the majority, if not all, of the nursery places be used by hospital staff. And in that regard, I think it's important, should it be deemed feasible, that a hospital staff be able to have a nursery provision very close to the site for their children, because I don't know of any nursery provision that's 24 hours in the surrounding area. So that's the reason for my amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. Thank you, Councillor Rad, for indicating that you second the amendment. Before I move to the vote, and by way of assistance, noting that this was an additional condition proposed by an update note. I suggest it will be helpful for planning officers to contextualise the reasons for this additional condition, to explain the hours of operation why they were proposed, so members, when considering and voting on the amendment, understand both sides of the arguments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You're quite right. There is a slightly amended condition in the update note that's been circulated to members of the committee this morning, and that suggests that the opening hours in relation to the creche be between 6:30 in the morning and 8:30 at night. Those conditions, as is normal with these types of application, have been shared with the applicants, and they are the conditions, they are the hours within that condition that the applicant is happy with. And I think my understanding is that they also reflect the hours of the existing creche. So the existing creche, I'm not aware is a 24-hour facility, but even if it isn't the case, as I say, these hours have been agreed and shared with the applicants. I would be slightly nervous about extending the hours of operation to a 24-hour basis, not least because that's not something that we as officers or you as a committee have considered within this committee report. It is open for the applicants at a future date to seek to vary those hours if they felt it was appropriate and necessary to do so. So I would caution against changing the hours, not least because that is not the 24-hour basis on which the amendment is being suggested is not something that we've as officers have had regard to. So things like environmental health comments, etc., would not reflect those hours.
Thank you.
Thank you to our planning case officer. Councillor Maloney, before we move to the vote on your amendment, which is valid, do you wish to reflect further on its contents and whether it proceeds? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would say that I think I understand the officer's comments about this and it's not being considered, but I think in view of the fact that this is a hospital campus, and I think in terms of being family friendly, my amendment would not oblige the nursery to operate in 24-hour mode. It would enable that to be done should that prove necessary at some stage in the future, without the additional complexity of having to apply for a removal or an amendment of that condition. So in terms of simplicity and enabling what we should be going towards, a more family-friendly society, I think the amendment is valid and I urge support for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. With that in mind, we'll therefore move to the vote on the second amendment. Just for clarity and for the benefit of everyone watching debate, Councillor Maloney's amendment will remove the time limitations on the operation of the creche, effectively enable it to operate in 24/7 without restriction. So with that in mind, I will move to you, first of all, Chair. Your vote, please.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Marat?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney?
For.
And Councillor Radford? Thank you, councillors, for your votes. That concludes the voting on the second amendment. The outcome of the vote is 2 members in favour, 4 members voting against, and the second amendment falls. In the absence of any further valid amendments being moved, we therefore revert to a vote on the Chair's recommendation, the resolution of which was proposed that the recommendation be approved subject to a legal agreement and conditions as proposed. So with that in mind, I will now seek votes from members of the committee. Chair, your vote, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. Councillor Radford? Thank you, councillors. That concludes the voting on the application, and the outcome is 4 members voting in favour, 2 members voting against, and no abstentions. For the benefit of the public record, councillors Maloney and Radford have voted against, and their dissent will be recorded on the decision on the application, the decision of which being the application is approved, subject to a legal agreement and conditions, details of which being set out in the minutes for this meeting once published. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move on to item number 5, which is not directly connected with the previous item, but is adjacent to the previous item. And we have the agent and the applicant and the architect for this application, who will address the committee. So can I call on Jim O'Brien and Joe Kember to address the committee, please?
Chair, if I can ask for a very brief pause in proceedings before we invite the next applicants and agents in, just so I can allow a number of returning members who do not have an interest in this application to take part fully in proceedings. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break just for people to get themselves back where they need to be, etc.
Thank you. For the benefit of public present, the live stream will be paused briefly at this juncture whilst committee
And I will call on the applicant and the architect to address the committee. So can I call on Jim O'Brien and Joe Kember, please?
Good morning. I'm Joe Kember from Gillingdon Architects, and we're the architects and the agents for the trust, for the Alder Hay Children's Trust. So I just wanted to talk through the proposals. The scheme that we're looking at is for a new...
Could I ask you to speak a little more loudly, please? Some of us are struggling to hear you.
No problem. The scheme that we're looking at is for a new neonatal unit and a paediatric assessment unit, and also an emergency decisions unit. The scheme that you're looking at now, on the first floor we've got the neonatal unit, and on the ground floor we've got the extension to ED, which is the using colours and themes that respond to the park. Using the colours that we've got with the natural colours of the render, and also the natural colours of the cladding as well. We've consulted with the clinical teams and also with the parents to arrive at the aesthetic of the building, and we are moving obviously forward today to discuss the proposals. This is another view from the other side. We've soft building and building it's almost like a transition to the park. So the design solution still has its own identity and sits separate from the main building, but it isn't in conflict with the main building. So in partnership with Liverpool Women's Hospital, the Alder Hay Children's Hospital is going to provide 22 single to the accommodation on the first floor of the existing hospital, and also at the ground floor. The partnership with Liverpool Women's is around children who need surgery, special surgery. So children that are born at Liverpool Women's that need surgery will move to Alder Hay Hospital, where they can have that surgery, but will also be cared for in an environment that is very different in terms of the approach that we've gone for. The Trust is really keen that we provide the 22 cots with linked parent accommodation. So each of the single rooms has a family integrated care element to it. So there's actually a parent's bedroom attached to that neonatal bedroom, which will be the first in the UK. It's something that's been done in other countries, in both Canada and also in Scandinavia, where the outcomes of babies is massively improved by having parents as an integral part of that care. And it obviously brings huge benefits to the clinical outcomes of those babies, not just initially when they're born, but also in later life as well. This is an image of the parents' rooms. As I said, it's at the back of the neonatal care area. All the rooms are en suite, and they have a calming interior, and they the rooms have been designed to promote the well-being of the parents and also to give them privacy, but also allow them to be as close as they can be to their babies and be integral to their care and well-being. On the ground floor, the increased waiting area for the existing emergency department will also be providing 22 bedrooms treatment spaces. They're actually short stay wards, so they're really there for observation and treatment as part of the Trust emergency care pathway. But again, the environment that we're looking at is one that's calming, that supports parents, there's additional accommodation to support parents and provide children with the best care. That's all we have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? No? Thank you very much. So I will now move on to the our planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. A fairly straightforward application, this. It's, as you've heard, it's for a 3-storey extension to the new Alder Hay building for relocation of the emergency decisions unit, and a paediatric assessment unit, and a new neonatal intensive care unit. I'll just very quickly take you through the report, Chair. Particularly in relation to policy, you'll see in the report that this is actually green space in the UDP. The reason that it's in green space is because the new park, the new hospital is within the previous park, and so that is an historic designation. So obviously, given the passage of time and where we are now with the local plan, we've obviously given much more weight to the new local plan than the green space allocation. But I just think it's important to reference that point. In terms of its wider design and layout, again, there's quite a detailed section there, and you've had the presentation. We've sought some amendments throughout this to try and get the design to more closely reflect the main hospital building, which has now been successfully achieved. There's a little section on amenity, and again, very simply, we're satisfied that there is no impact on nearby residents or indeed the proposal for the residential development further up the end of Alder Road, Eaton Road. And then the other issues, Chair, are fairly self-explanatory. We have brought this to you primarily because it has a Section 106 associated with it. There has been an objection as well, but that objection, if you look at it, refers to the sort of wider issues again about the replacement park and so on. So the Section 106 is to provide for some street trees and for an art strategy. And again, so subject to the usual conditions, Chair, and that legal agreement, we're happy to recommend approval and happy, of course, to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for John Hayes? No? Thank you. So in that case, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any amendments? No. In which case, we'll move immediately to a vote on your recommendation. I'll take your vote first, please, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
Agreed.
Councillor Hanson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Agreed.
Thank you. Colleagues, that concludes voting on this application of those members eligible and present to vote, and the outcome is unanimous. The application being therefore approved subject to a legal agreement and conditions as stated. We'll therefore move to the next item of business. Chair, if I may. We will just be briefly advising the Chair of Committee, who has been absent for the last 2 items by virtue of a declared interest, and he will shortly be resuming Chair of the meeting.
Thank you, everybody, for this morning, particularly for the Deputy Chair for deputising for me on those important items. Thank you. Can we move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is item 6, which is 6 Watkinson Street, Liverpool 1. And we do have the agent present. Is it Andy Bellaby?
Yes, hello. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, okay. Would you like to carry on, please?
Yes, thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so 6 Watkinson Street is the conversion and extension of the former 6-storey warehouse on the junction of Jamaica and Watkinson Street in the Baltic Triangle, highlighted red on the aerial image you can see there. As you can see, the building sits between some recently extended and new build developments, and the adjoining buildings highlighted in blue are also under the ownership of the clients, which have already been converted. Highlighted yellow there on the image within the red line is an area of flat roof tucked in between the pitched roofs of the adjoining buildings, which are utilising an external, which we are going to utilise as the external plant space. You can move to the next slide, please. The proposal looks to convert the warehouse into commercial office space with a rooftop extension of 2.5 storeys above the existing parapet. On the screen is the ground floor plan, which represents the typical floor layouts, each of which have the circulation core and WCs to the back of the plan, and open office floor plate, with the exception of the top floor, where we introduce a rooftop cafe and bar. The main entrance off Jamaica Street utilises an existing window opening with sill drop down to ground level. And along Watkinson Street, we utilise the existing door openings for refuse and plant access. Next slide, please. A planning application of the same proposed building envelope and massing received a resolution to approve back in January 2020 for use as an apart hotel. Since then, the client chose to change the use to commercial office space and was submitted back in Christmas 2020 with the same external envelope and massing. However, since the first application, the Baltic Triangle SRF, which will be adopted as an SPT upon the adoption of the Liverpool local plan, has taken more weighting. Within this Baltic SRF, the only guidance for rooftop extensions stipulates for buildings over 4 storeys, roof extensions should not exceed 2 storeys or 8 metres, and roof extensions should not inappropriately dominate the existing building by extending too far from the original building fabric. In response to this, we have improved the design of the previous application by now omitting the 1.6 metre high rooftop plants and external escapes there over the adjacent property. And instead, we will utilise the existing flat roof area identified in the first slide, sat between the adjoining pitch roofs, thus bringing the height of the extension down to approximately 7.7 metres above the existing parapet, which is below the 8 metres stipulated in the SRF. Next slide, please. Whilst the extension is 2.5 storeys above the existing rather than 2 storeys, we have taken steps to make sure the extension appears subservient to the existing building. Firstly, the floor heights are kept to a minimum to reduce the overall height. And as you can see on the elevation, the extension is 7.7 metres above the parapet and 4.4 metres above the existing pitched roof height. Externally, we have detailed the elevation with an exposed exoskeletal frame set back from the face of the existing brickwork, with cladding set back behind the frame too. The exposed columns are full height without a horizontal break in the form of a beam to avoid expressing the number of additional storeys, and the full height windows are expressed as continuous vertical slots. This helps the extension appear as an extruded form of the existing building rather than an object sat on top and feeling too top heavy. Next slide, please. At the top floor, we have the cafe and bar area. And here we have set back the massing and provided a terrace area with glazing across the principal elevation to Jamaica Street to also help reduce the perceived massing. And along with the approach to the detailing and the industrial palette of materials in the form of steel and weathered metal that complement the existing brick building, we feel that the proposal is an elegant addition to its surrounding context and the Baltic market. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I just had a question about fire safety. I noticed that a change from the previous application or previous plans was the removal of an external fire escape staircase. I just wondered if you could talk us through what fire escape arrangements are now, please.
Yes, sure, no problem. So there's in the adjacent property, an element that has already been converted into commercial space. There is a fire protected core, and there is an existing doors into that core from the existing building. So within the existing building fabric, we can utilize that access as escape, as a second form of escape from the protected fire escape core that we have in the main floor plate. And we're just working through those details with building control for the upper stories in the extension that will work down and connect into the top of that core in the adjacent building.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Thompson? Oh, okay, thanks. No other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. My question, well, it's more of a comment really, and it's somewhat subjective, but it's about the aesthetics of this extension. And looking at it, I do realise that there is an orthodoxy within the planning community that pastiche is bad, but I think this extension does stand out as glaring somewhat against the existing the building that it's being put on and also the surrounding buildings. And I just wonder what the architect's views are on that. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, yeah, Andy, have you got any comments you'd like to make in response to that?
I could give a subjective response, but I think considering the state of the extensions in the adjoining the properties in close proximity, I think it's certainly a far better example of architectural quality.
Well, as is the case, obviously, you know. No other questions or comments. Can I ask Fergal to summarise the application and cover any points raised by members?
Thank you, Chair. Fergal McFly, team leader for the City Centre. Chair, you've got a very detailed report in front of you, and you've also listened to very kind of informative and accompanied by good illustrations that kind of give the concept for the development. This was a scheme that was previously considered by you back in January of last year. The proposal is for a mixed-use non-residential building consisting primarily of office uses, which would support existing employment infrastructure within the Baltic Triangle, together with a rooftop cafe. Chair, there's been a number of the report details the objections received in relation to the application. One has been received from adjacent business, largely to do with construction traffic, the unavailability of parking, the state of the roads. This would be addressed by a construction management plan. There's been, which is attached to the recommendation, been a letter of support from Engage Liverpool, and Councillor Hetty Woods has also objected to the application. She considers the rooftop extension, which is between 2.5 and 3 stories high, too high for the host building. You've got an existing kind of 6-story warehouse, which is unlisted, but it forms an attractive feature and kind of gives a nod to the historical use of the Baltic area. The proposal is for a 3-story rooftop extension. Since the application was first considered by yourself, the Baltic Triangle SRF has come into fruition, and that, as the presenter stated, for rooftop extension, an ancillary rooftop extension in this location should be no more than 8 meters in height. Through careful design and amendments to the application, the overall height of the building has been reduced. The overall height of the rooftop has been reduced to 7.77 meters in height. I take Councillor Maloney's comments on board. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But I think it's an interesting feature. It's quite contemporary, but it gives a nod to the former industrial nature of the Baltic Triangle. It's a lot. It's got kind of a mixture of steel girders and glazing. The purpose is to kind of make it a lightweight rooftop extension, and it is, as the presenter alluded to, it's different, and in our opinion, it forms an improvement on previous more historic rooftop extensions in the area. The scheme is supported by officers both in terms of your heritage and urban design officers. Chair, the report deals with all issues relating to principle of development, design, residential amenity, highways, which all matters have been fully teased out in the report. If you've got any other questions for myself, subject to Section 106 agreement, given the size of the existing building and the rooftop extension. Thank you, Chair.
Do members have any questions or comments? No? I think obviously, it's subjective, obviously, when you see developments like this, but that area down there, I can remember when I grew up around there, and it has changed quite a lot now. It's more of a mixed area. So, and some of the objections we had was in relation to problems with construction, and there's a construction management plan in place, and it has got the improvement programme in terms of that it improves on the previous scheme. So therefore, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. We have a valid motion before us from the Chair, the effect of which will be to approve the application subject to a legal agreement and conditions as stated in the published case officer report. Do we have any amendments from members? No. In which case we will conduct a vote on the Chair's recommendation, and I would invite the Chair to vote first, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Maloney.
For.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application, and the vote is unanimous of those members present and voting, and the application is therefore approved, subject to a legal agreement and conditions as stated. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Item 7 is Crawford House, the Royal British Legion, 161 Rose Lane. In relation to this particular application, if members recall, this was withdrawn at the last committee because the applicants had put in an objection for non-determination. So what we're doing this morning is to give a view. And although we've got the agent for the applicant here, who's happy to answer any questions, there are no speakers against. And if I can ask Stuart to take us through this application, and then if members have got any questions or comments, we'll move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Clark, team leader for the South team. As the Chair's alluded to, this application is before you for you to offer a view to the planning inspectorate as to what the committee would have resolved had they had the opportunity to make a decision on the application. It was scheduled to be on an agenda on the I think it was the 27th of July, but the applicant put an appeal in against non-determination about 3 or 4 days before that. As a result of that application was withdrawn from the agenda whilst we were pending the start date for the appeal, which we've now had. Thus, it's back before you today to consider and to allow you to make a resolution to offer a view to the inspectorate. This is an application to erect 10 new apartments and convert the existing sports and social club into 8 apartments. It's part outline, part full, with the full element being the conversion, and the outline with all matters reserved being the area located on the bowling green to the rear of the site. There was a previous application very similar to this for 4 more, which included 4 more new units. That was refused on the basis of impact on future occupiers from a building in the Rose Mosley car park, but primarily towards the impact on overlooking of gardens in Riddledale Road from windows in the gable elevations or the elevations of the blocks. That was considered by the planning inspectorate, who was happy with everything apart from the overlooking element, and the appeal subsequently dismissed on that basis and that basis alone. So the applicant has now has resubmitted the application with a revised indicative layout that demonstrates that there can be no overlooking into the rear gardens of Ribblesdale Road, and there's also a reduction in quantum of 4 units, which has reduced the scale that would be needed to accommodate that the inspector originally dismissed the appeal on, and therefore that appeal decision is a very strong material consideration. So as I've said, the front part of the site is the Sorts and Social Club, and this sits within the district, within the local centre, with the remainder of the site being primarily residential. The conversion of the former Sports and Social Club is acceptable and will provide a sustainable use for the long-term future of the building, with the alterations such that they will not affect visual or residential amenity. The flats comply with the national space standards and will be appropriately served in terms of parking, waste and cycle provision. The principle of developing the site is considered to be acceptable and was not objected to by the Planning Inspectorate in dismissing the previous appeal. It will involve the loss of the bowling green. However, the bowling club that used to use the green have been relocated to the underused facility at Longcroft Avenue, where the applicant has also funded a qualitative uplift in that facility to improve facilities not just for the replaced bowling club, but for all users of the Longcroft Avenue facility. This relocation and associated qualitative improvements to another facility are considered to be acceptable so as to outweigh the loss of the existing bowling green. The proposed flat blocks are in a very similar location to those previously shown on the previous application, where the inspector had no issue with the siting. And as I've said, they're of a reduced quantum and scales that dismissed on appeal. But they have overcome the blocks, so they've been designed so there will be no potential overlooking. The images you see on the screen are indicative. It's just one potential way that those blocks may look. If members are minded to approve, there are parameters limitations that require the maximum height. The blocks can't exceed 11.5 metres and they can't exceed the use to 7.5 metres. And there's also a condition that restricts any clear glazed windows being inserted on any reserved matters design that would face properties in Ribblesdale Road, which overcomes the inspector's concerns. In relation to highways matters, it's been carefully assessed by the Highways Department, and it's considered that the level of parking provision for both elements at 17 spaces is acceptable. Although it's one less than would normally be required, the site's location in a highly accessible location for public transport, with Mossway Hill Station being very close nearby, good bus links, goods and services are in very close proximity, and there is significant cycle store provision, and the level of parking is therefore considered to be acceptable. In terms of impacts on the local highway network, it's considered that trip generation would be less than that currently generated by the former social club, which is the lawful use of the site, and the proposal will not be detrimental to the highway safety or unacceptably affect the local highway network. Concerns relating to ecology and trees have been duly considered by the relevant specialists, and they raise no objection on these grounds, with the site not being designated as a site of nature conservation value. It's therefore recommended to you, Chair, that the view be offered to the Planning Inspectorate that the local planning authority would have recommended approval of the application if it would have had the opportunity to determine the application, and that's what your officers are recommending today.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Do members have any questions either for the agents or to Stuart? No? Well, in that case, can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the benefit of those viewing proceedings, the recommendation from the Chair on this occasion is purely for the committee setting out its view and position on the application, where it's still to have the capacity to determine it. However, at the moment, the application will be determined by the Planning Inspectorate through appeal. With that in mind, I'll invite the Chair to cast his view and opinion on the application.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Maloney.
For.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application, and therefore the views to be submitted to the planning inspectorate is that the committee would have been mindful for in its capacity discharging functions of the local planning authority to support and approve the application on the basis set in the case officer report. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks, Mike. Item 8 is 10 Knowsley Road, Liverpool. We do have the agent, Fiona Root, who's going to address the committee, and there are no speakers opposed to this, so can I ask Fiona to address the committee, please?
Hi, thanks for hearing me today. The application is just for a small existing coach house in Cressington Park. It's at present in an extremely precarious structural state, and the engineer who has done the report on it has basically told the owners to gate it off and don't use the garden because it is that close to falling down. We are proposing just to reinstate this existing coach house to its original form, albeit with new windows. Internally, it's going to be used as just a sitting area and bedroom for the main family house guests only. The applicant is fully aware of all covenants that are attached to Cressington Park about having separate dwellings that are not allowed. It's never been his intention to do this. All power and facilities and services are coming from the main house to the coach house. It is not a separate dwelling. I would just ask you to recommend this for approval and help save this coach house. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for Fiona before she sits down? No? Can I bring in Stuart, the team leader, who's going to take us through this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Despite what would appear to be quite a significant number of objections, it is relatively straightforward. The reason, if you look at the description, it does say as a separate unit of accommodation. That's because it's capable of being, it's got all the facilities that wouldn't be needed to live separately from the main house. That's the description behind it. But as you've heard from the applicant, and you'll see there's a condition attached, or a proposed condition attached to the report, is that occupancy would be strictly limited to being associated to the main dwelling. So it can never be occupied by somebody not associated with the main dwelling house. And you'll see from the objections before you that the vast majority of them are about concerns about it being hived off as a separate unit of accommodation for use by persons not associated with the house. And that subsequent impact on the character of the conservation area through subdivisions of plots. And then you'll also see lots of references to covenants and things like that. As you'll see from the papers, there's no subdivision of the plot at all. There's no new vehicular accesses. So in visual terms, there will be absolutely no change whatsoever. And in that respect, we're happy that there's no impact whatsoever on the character of the conservation area. The physical changes to the building have been carefully considered by the conservation specialist, and they're happy that it's a sensitive approach to bring the building back into use. There will be no detrimental impacts on the character of the conservation area from those physical works. In terms of the issues revolving around covenants, they are matters outside of the planning process. Should members be minded to approve this, there would still be it would be down to the occupier or the owner of the property to ensure that they comply with any legal requirements outside of that planning process, and that's not for members to consider when making a decision on the application. As advised, there's no new vehicular accesses. There's off-street parking that can take additional cars. That will mean there should be no need for on-street parking. And we're happy that this proposal, as you've heard, the building's in a state of disrepair, is going to secure the long-term future of the building without detriment to the conservation area or any nearby occupiers. And we're happy to recommend it for approval, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart. Do members have any questions or comments? No, obviously, I think, this is a straightforward application to convert a coach house that's really run down to one-bedroom apartment attached to the main house, and there's a condition to that effect. So therefore, can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. Any further comments or amendments from members? No, in which case we will move straight away to a vote from the Chair's recommendation, which is to approve the application. Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4,
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4,
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4,
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4,
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
4,
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4,
Thank you. And Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you, councillors. That concludes the voting and the application is approved unanimously. We therefore move on to our next item of business. Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The next item is 90 County Road for use of the ground floor premises as a hot food takeaway. This was deferred at the last committee for further information. We do have the agent, Mike Carr, who's going to address the committee. Mike, are you there? There we are. Would you like to address the committee, please?
Hello, am I on?
Okay, Mike, would you like to address the committee, please?
Hello?
Mike, are you able to hear us? No.
Can you just confirm you can hear me, please?
We can do, yes.
Yeah. Would you like to speak? We can hear you.
I can't hear you very well. Can you just confirm that you can hear me, please? Yeah, right, okay, thank you. Yeah, as you'll be aware, this is the second occasion this application's been back to the committee.
I think you're frozen.
I think there's a delay on the line.
Please continue.
Chair, would it be possible to put a message to him? Because we can quite clearly hear him.
I'm aware that the applicant is also present virtually on this call. Could I ask the applicant to please contact their agent, Mr. Carr, directly, advise him to continue speaking, and we can communicate through the applicant that way if that's necessary.
Yeah, hello.
We can hear you if you want to proceed.
Can you hear me at all?
We can do, yes. There's no audio issues our end, so it may be an issue with your connection. If you care to continue, please.
Right. Okay. I'll say. Yeah. I'll say what I need to say, and I won't worry about the delay. Okay. So this is the second occasion the application's been to members, and the members on that occasion requested additional information. All information is now contained in the case officer reports, which analyses each element quite well, very well. So I would ask that members review the fresh report, review the individual elements of the application, and we would ask that the members accept the officer's recommendation. This is a site that's been vacant for a long time, and it would also give members an opportunity to allow the site to regenerate, and also to apply various planning conditions that will undoubtedly, in my opinion, remove some of the objections that local people have made. And on that basis, we'd ask you to recommend the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Does the applicant wish to address the committee in any way? No. Okay, do members have any questions or comments to the agent? No, okay. Therefore, can I ask the team leader, John, to come in and summarise this application for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application to use the ground floor of 90 County Road for the sale of hot takeaway food. The application was brought to you back in June of this year, and following an amendment by Councillor Prince, the matter was amended in order to clarify a number of matters which are set out in paragraph 1.3 of the further report. So we tried to respond in this further report to the concerns that were expressed back in June, particularly around the quantum of hot food takeaways currently operating and the application of policy SB4. So in relation to that, you'll see from the report that there are a total of, by our count, a total of 234 units. The current amount of hot food takeaways is therefore 10%. And if you were to allow this, that would increase the number of units to 11.1%. Why is that important? It's important because you have a new policy, SB4, within the local plan that puts a threshold of 10% on applications for takeaways within district centres. So the obvious question that members may have is, if that threshold is being breached, why are we as officers recommending planning permission still be granted? The simple reason, Chair, as is set out in the report, is the weight to be given to the policy SB4 in the draft local plan. So it's important to remember that whilst your officers are consistently striving to apply the local plan policies wherever they can, there are occasions such as this where we have to exercise that with some caution. So in this particular case, we do recognise that it's excessive in terms of the policy, so that 10% threshold is breached, but we consider that it's appropriate only to give moderate weight to that policy, and therefore the application needs to be considered against the UDP. The other issues, Chair, again, are fairly self-explanatory. So there was a question about the cumulative impact policy. The information that we've been given by our licensing colleagues is that there is no cumulative impact policy for licensing in relation to that area. Even if there were to be a cumulative impact policy, it is not relevant to consideration of planning matters. Highways have reconsidered the matter, and again, their comments are reported in the report in full, and their conclusions again are that there wouldn't be no harmful impact on highway safety. And then lastly, Chair, we've addressed issues of noise, nuisance and antisocial behaviour associated with the proposal. One last thing is that the committee, I think at the time, mentioned the County Road stakeholder group, originally set out, Chair, back in June 2021, and for the reasons set out in the further report in response to the concerns raised at that meeting, we, as officers, maintain the position that planning permission should be granted for the reasons set out, but of course happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John. Councillor Hanson.
You're starting to sound like a highways officer now. There's a rule, but let's ignore the rule because it suits. If the rule says 10% and it comes in at 11%, that's where we are. That's the rule. The rule is 10%. It either is or it isn't. So 10%, they're breaching the rule. So why has it been brought here? The reality is, for our officers, I'm a little bit tired of listening to that's the rule. But on this occasion, we're going to breach the rule. We either have a set of rules and we apply them, or we don't. In terms of the the county road body is set up. I did take this to them, but I raised it, but then come out the discussion. So they had that discussion on their own. The three councillors can't be here today because of a variety of other business commitments, but they're objecting to the rule. I struggle. I really struggle when I'm supposed to get. I'm not being disparaging, but I'm supposed to be getting professional guidance and advice. And there's a rule, but on this occasion I'm going to breach the rule. So on that basis, I will not be supporting this, Chair. I think it's just a cop out, for the best expression.
Okay, Councillor Hanson. I mean, before I bring Councillor Prince in, I think what the officer was saying was that the local plan is a draft local plan at the moment. And every report that we get, it tells you in relation to where we are with the local plan. In relation to this, SP4, which is in the local plan about the 10%, can only be accorded moderate weight. Therefore, for this application, we're using the UDP. That's the explanation. I hope that satisfies you, Joe.
It sounds like, when the policeman pulls you up and says you were doing 33 miles an hour, and I say, well, actually, you've got a discretion, haven't you? You don't need to book me. I'm a 30 zone, but I'm doing 33. According to John's logic, the police should say, I'm sorry for pulling up, Councillor Hanson. I made a terrible error. Away you go. No, I get a ticket. I get a speeding ticket, quite rightly, because I broke the law.
I don't think that's a fair comparison, to be honest, Joe. But anyway, I'm going to bring in Councillor Prince.
Well, my comments are very similar to Councillor Hanson's. First of all, I think we should thank you for bringing it back fairly quickly, because we did say, we wanted this, it's been waiting 12 months and more. So thank you for bringing it back fairly quickly. But the issue is, if 11% is acceptable on a 10% policy, at which point, at what figure do you say that does become sufficient to turn it down? Would 12% be enough? 20%? Where do you actually draw the line? Taking into account what Councillor Conception is saying about it not being that important, where do you stop?
Okay, John, would you like to reply?
I'll answer both Councillor Hanson and Councillor Prince. Where we will draw the line is at 10%, but the line will be drawn at the point that the local plan is the adopted policy of the City Council. At the moment, unfortunately, it is not adopted policy. It is still a draft local plan. Now, in all our reports and following legal advice, we set out in all the reports how the committee is expected to make decisions. So the starting point is the statutory development plan. The statutory development plan for the time being remains the UDP. It is very out of date, but nonetheless it remains the statutory development plan until such time as the local plan has been adopted. The local plan, however, is a material consideration. So it is something that you can take into account in the consideration and determination of any application. The weight that you give to that is ultimately a matter for the decision maker. That is what the court has said. What is clear, so in the original report, we have said that we think, because of the stage that it's gone, because of the representations that were made through the local plan process, that the policy SP4, that 10% threshold, ought to be given significant weight. However, what we try to explain in this background report is, notwithstanding that, the clear direction that the planning inspectorate have been taking in relation to a number of recent appeals is that it doesn't matter what weight we think it's got, the planning inspectorate are only applying moderate weight. So because of that, your officers consider it is prudent to apply moderate weight to the SP4 policy, and therefore in your decision making you can only give it moderate weight, and therefore it is not sufficient weight to offset the statutory development plan, which remains the UDP. So I appreciate that's a long way of explaining it, but I hope that clarifies the issues for both Councillor Prince and Hanson. Happy to answer the questions.
Thanks for that. Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. There seems to be an inconsistency here. I agree with Councillor Hanson. And I'll cite the example of several meetings ago when we had the Septon Park over 55s development, and there was the issue of the number of electric vehicle charging stations there, and the local plan figure of 5% was applied, even though the local plan actually isn't yet formally adopted, and that was cited as a reason as not to give a higher number. So there's an inconsistency here. Things aren't being applied uniformly on the same bases. So I do agree with Councillor Hanson and Councillor Prince on this.
Chair, can I just pick up a point as well, please, in terms of the consistency? There is consistency applied. I think this matter is further complicated by the different figures of the 10% that what paragraph 1.4 of the report sets out. So we as planning officers need to take that balance. So there's slight discrepancy between what the applicant says and what we hold in terms of that 10%. It's really marginal. So this application in any event will push that over the 10%. So you can assume going forward that no other application will be supported under the local plan policy. So there's two things going on here. There's the application of the local plan policy, but there's also a judgment as to where the cusp of the 10% is applied. Paragraph 1.4 sets it out.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I've got Councillor Cardwell first.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, we talk about the local plan and the figure is 10%. In the UDP, the plan that, if you like, precedes, what is that figure?
There is none, Chair.
There isn't. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hanson, do you want to come back?
It's about, you know, when you go to court and the judge leaves, you know, the jury leaves out the not, you know, and you end up guilty. You know, you can't have a rule and then just ignore the rule. Or today we'll ignore that rule, but tomorrow we'll apply that rule. Now, I'm quite clear. I'm quite clear. You know, the percentage is above what the local plan is saying. What you said at the last meeting. That's why we asked you to go away and check it. And I just think on that point it should be rejected.
Okay. Any other members got any questions or comments? Obviously, I mean, there is a difference of opinion. My view is, as the chair, that the explanation is that the local plan is not policy at the moment, and we can only accord moderate weight to this particular SP4 within the local plan. Therefore, we rely on what is the unitary development plan to make base our decision in. And County Road is a really vibrant road, isn't it? You know, and well, I mean, I've read the report, but I mean, going down County Road, I mean, it's and this particular premises has been vacant for some time. It's a borderline case, isn't it? Obviously, members will make their own mind up, but the report is clear, I think, that in this particular instance, that the recommendation should be approved. I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved.
Chair, can I move opposition and move that it's rejected?
Let Mike bring you in. I've moved the recommendation, and then Mike will ask if there's any further amendments, etc.
Thank you, Chair. I will come to the point on further amendments shortly, but just to summarise some of the discussions we've had today. We're effectively dealing with the ranking order of priority as to what policies are given the most weight in considering this application. At this point in time, legally, the council's development policy is the UDP. It may be old, it may be historic. That's the policy against which we assess applications. That operates in parallel with the NPPF. Below that, second tier of considerations, we have the local plan and policy, which the case officer and head of planning has referenced. And again, it is moderate weight only, but again, the policy which governs this application at this point in time until you as a full council formally adopt a local plan, it's the UDP. That is the policy. With that in mind, Councillor Hanson, I'll come to your amendment.
I'd remind yourself, Michael, and I'd remind the committee, I didn't bring the 10% here. The planning officers brought the 10%.
Absolutely. Just to assist discussions, though, it's important that we understand.
I don't know why the 10% was brought, but the fact of the matter is the 10% was brought. And the officers explained that this application took us over the 10%. They quote the rule. I didn't know the rule. So based on that advice and guidance I've been given from officers, I would move that the application be rejected based on that particular 10% rule. Then guidance.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Just to assist, obviously, by way of context, in the event that committee is minded to agree your amendment, once we confirm the wording of it, the effect will be a further report back to committee to confirm any reasons for refusal. But before we come to the precise wording, obviously a seconder, what you're essentially seeking is that the application be refused on the basis that, taking into account the moderate weighting applied to the emergent local plan and policies therein, the committee considers that as the proposed development will exceed the threshold set out in the emergent local plan, committee is minded to therefore refuse the application on this basis, contrary to the current UDP provision. Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question. Even though we've got the policies, do we not still have to consider each case on its merits?
That is absolutely correct. But again, when you're talking about the policies in inverted commas, again, we're going a circular argument here. The governing policy here remains the UDP. When does a policy become a policy become a policy? And the short answer in this instance is when the local plan comes to full council, gets agreed and signed off there, the final period of public consultation statutory notice takes place, then it formally becomes policy and the UDP becomes an historic document. We're not at that stage, but as Councillor Hanson, Councillor Maloney and Councillor Prince have rightly said, the local plan has been entered and added into these discussions. And again, the case officer has rightly done that for the reason that you can give that moderate weight. Now, what you consider moderate weight may be such that you, when applying the UDP, consider that the impact of breaching the 10% threshold is such to merit refusal, which is what Councillor Hanson's removed. Thank you. In which case, is there a seconder for Councillor Hanson's amendment? Thank you, Councillor Maloney. So we will now, after some lengthy debate, and thank you for your patience, vote on Councillor Hanson's amendment. So, taking the chair's vote first. Thank you.
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson. Thank you. Councillor Marrett.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Maloney.
For.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the amendment, of which 3 members have voted in favour, 5 have voted against. The amendment therefore falls. What I will do, however, is note the support of that amendment from Councillors Prince, Hanson and Maloney in the minutes for this particular item. We will therefore revert to the Chair's recommendation, which was to approve the application. So with that in mind, I'll invite the Chair to cast their vote.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Against.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Maloney.
Against.
Thank you, councillors. That concludes the voting on the application, and the decision is based on a vote of 5 members voting in favour, 3 members voting against, and the application is approved on that basis, with the dissent of councillors Hanson, Prince and Maloney recorded and minuted within the record of this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. we now come to the last item on the agenda, which is Middleway near Mossway, Liverpool 11, for the telemast. And there are no speakers for or against. Can I ask the team leader to come in and take us through this application, please?
I can, Chair. I simply say that this is a familiar type of application to you. It is a proposal for telecommunications equipment in the form of a 15-metre high monopole mast with associated antenna and equipment cabinet in the location that's been described and set out on the plans. The conclusion of your officers is that this would not be harmful to visual amenity. Siting design is appropriate, and for those reasons, Chair, we are recommending approval.
Thanks, John. Are there any questions, comments from members? Councillor Prince.
We've just, as you know, John, we just had one of these similar in our ward. I think the map on the last page is pretty hopeless. How far is it from any building? You know, are they shops? What are they next to it?
Chair, Councillor Princeton, Chair, on the quality of the map, and apologies for that. The site is adjacent to that. It's in the centre of the site where that arrow is. So it's adjacent to that open space. I'm not sure if we've got any photographs actually, Mike. Nothing. Apologies.
Chair, can I attempt to be helpful here, as I used to represent that ward? The site is immediately adjacent to some open land, and the other side of the road is built upon, and it's fairly close to the crossroads, and I agree with Councillor Prince's comment that the map is useless.
Thanks for that, Councillor Maloney. Councillor Beck?
Councillor Maloney's already said exactly what I would, because I'm very familiar, obviously, living there.
Okay, thanks for that. Are there any other comments? No. Well, can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. We'll move immediately to the vote because I see no indications of an amendment. So, Chair, please cast your vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Marrett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Maloney.
Abstain.
Thank you, councillors. That concludes the voting on this particular application of business. We have one abstention, the remaining members having cast their vote in favour of the application, and it is therefore approved on that basis. And that is the final item of business on today's agenda. So I'll now invite the chair to make their concluding comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a long morning, I think. We can all... but, I mean, I could just thank everybody for attending this morning and for the constructive way the planning committee has dealt with each and every application. Thank you all, and look forward to seeing you at the next committee, and enjoy the rest of the day.